What is your form or forms of creativity?
Yeah, forums, I think, is probably the best way to put it because it's a couple of different projects that are all sort of intertwined with one another. Um, I guess the best way to describe what I've been working on recently is it's a series of drawings slash paintings that are based off of characters and scenes and themes from an unfinished novel that I wrote a few summers ago. Um, and that novel itself comes from an even deeper um, pool of inspiration that's been sort of beneath the surface of my artistic practice since about 2001. And when I was in high school and I started on this kind of world building project, which has for quite some time, for most of my artistic career, in fact, it was kind of an undercurrent that I would work on when I had a bit of downtime and I wasn't working on my quote more serious projects. But in the summer of 23, it sort of swapped places, and the work which I'd been working on up to that point, which were sort of hyper realistic oil paintings based off of video stills. I had kind of burned out on that particular body of work. I had a few shows out of it, and I sort of feel like I pushed it about as far as I possibly could. And a lot of the work which I was doing at that point was kind of spinning my wheels, and I wasn't really going anywhere with it. And so I decided that I would take a break from that, and I sort of did without any sort of idea or reference material for what I was going to be doing. I went back to basically Francis Bacon mode and just started drawing and painting myself, my self portraits. I had this mirror in my studio. I was in Bushwick at the time. This is before I joined up with Chashama, about a year before. And I had this studio in Bushwick, and my studio mate had this old mirror in the space, and I think it might have been kind of an older, cheap mirror. I don't think it was exactly made properly, and it was kind of distorted. If you looked at it from a certain angle, it would sort of warp the reflection a little bit. And so I started drawing and painting myself in this distorted mirror. It ended up being a little bit Baconian in both the visual sense of it with the distortions and also just the idea of you don't have a subject matter, you just, work on yourself. And that's what
Yeah,
I did for maybe a month or two. Just sort of started focusing on my own image, and I used the materials that I sort of had lying around. I did a few of them in oils, but I mostly worked in charcoal on vellum. And the vellum came from about a decade before. I was in graduate school at the Pratt Institute, and during my first semester there, the school was closing down their school store. They used to have their own. It's called I think it's called the film and video building now, but back then it was the school store. They sold stuff for all the different areas: fine art, architecture, whatever the field was. It was supposed to be sold there, but there was a Blick store opening up on the same block, and they were going to just sort of move everything over to the Blick store and shut down the school store. And so they had the most incredible clearance sale my first semester there, and I stocked up practically a lifetime worth of supplies. I bought reams and rolls of this drafting vellum that I think was meant for the architecture and industrial design students. But whenever I needed to, sketch something out, I would just grab a sheet of vellum because it was a naturally occurring resource at that point in my studio. I was never going to run out of it. So when I was going to do some of these sketches, I had a ton of charcoal just sort of lying around from my figure drawing days, and I had this vellum. And something about that particular combination, the velvety darkness of this charcoal just on top of this translucent, ghostly vellum, the delicacy of it, something about that just seemed so appealing to me when I was working on it.
mm,
And and then something just sort of clicked in my mind one day, and I sort of had this vision of some of these characters from this novel that I started the summer before. And the story, it's called The Vaster Conspiracy. and it's a neo-Baroque magic realist novel that takes place in this kind of underground city, this sort of pre-industrial clockwork underground city, and it's based on it's all based on art counterfeiting, which I think ties in nicely to some of the ideas of the Baroque, because when you look at the Baroque period, it's all so much of the art and the literature is all about the search for some sort of underlying truth beneath the various veils and layers of appearances. And for this story, I sort of came in with the idea of, what if there is no kernel of truth beneath these layers of appearances, but as you pull them away, you just get another layer underneath of it, kind of like an infinite, endless onion of layer after layer after layer. But there's really nothing, there's no core of truth underneath of it. It's all just these layers of appearances, and this sort of just seem endless, one after another. And trying to move towards that core of truth is sort of a very paranoid experience, because it becomes a questioning of, is this true or not? What can actually be trusted? Can anything be trusted? And so I sort of started moving towards this idea of the main character being this art counterfeiter, and he sort of slowly starts to try to pull away these veils of appearances, and sort of becomes increasingly paranoid as the story goes on. And viewing it from his particular viewpoint, the tone changes and his perspective on things changes. At the onset of the story, he's very much focused on the surface of things. I sort of based the writing style for the first maybe 2/3 of the story on Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho, and the protagonist's very superficial view of everything. Everything is all about appearances and the surface of it. And you have the protagonist sort of, analyzing the superficial aspect of everything, what a painting looks like, what another character is wearing, what he himself is wearing, but he doesn't really analyze what any of this means. It's all about this sort of shining, gleaming surface. Everything is sort of gilded, like this kind of Baroque frame, but there's no real analysis into why anything is the way in which it is. The question just never comes up for him. He never really tries to dig underneath the layers of appearances to get to any sort of truth. But then, as his mental state starts to sort of change throughout as the story progresses, he starts to look deeper into things, and that sort of, in a way, it changes the perspective of it. Things undergo an anamorphic shift of perspective, and that's when things start to get really interesting.